Let's just dive right into this one, shall we? You read the Bible, and this phrase, the fear of the Lord, it pops up all over the place. And if we're being honest, it sounds, kind of scary, right? Does it mean we're supposed to be terrified of getting zapped by lightning, or is it something else, something bigger? Today, we are going to unpack this huge biblical puzzle. And we're going to kick things off with this really potent quote from Dr. John Oswalt. Listen to that again. You can worship God, but not fear him. He's basically saying you can go to church every Sunday, sing all the songs, do all the right things, and still be missing the entire point. So what on earth is the difference?
And that, right there, is the million-dollar question. Are worship and fear just two sides of the same coin? Is one part of the other? Well, it turns out that a lot of our confusion today starts with just a single critical word in the original text that got a little bit lost in translation.
Which brings us perfectly to our first point. The root of this whole misunderstanding, this whole puzzle, can be traced all the way back to how we translate one single ancient Hebrew word. So there's this wild story back in the book of 2 Kings. The northern kingdom of Israel has been conquered, the people are exiled, and the Assyrian Empire moves a bunch of new settlers into the land. Now, most of our English Bibles say that these new folks did not worship the Lord, but that's not quite what the original text said.
See, the actual Hebrew word used is Yah-Reh, and it doesn't mean to worship. It means to fear. The text isn't saying they didn't go through the motions of worship. It's saying they didn't fear God. And trust me, that is a huge difference.
And if you're wondering just how important this one word is, look at this. In this one pretty short passage of Scripture, the word for fear, Yah-Reh, appears 11 times. 11! It's like the biblical author is grabbing us by the shoulders, shouting, pay attention to this. This isn't just about Sunday morning songs. It's about a fundamental way of seeing the world.
So, what happens when you don't have this fear? How did it play out for these new settlers? Well, it led to a very real, very dangerous problem. Let's call it their lion problem. Okay, so here's the quick backstory. The Assyrians were masters of control. They had this mixmaster strategy of shuffling conquered people all over their empire to keep them from organizing and rebelling. So, you've got these brand new settlers in Samaria, and they have no clue about the customs or the rules of the local god. And then, all of a sudden, lions start attacking them.
Now the text says God sent the lions, but does that mean he supernaturally zapped them into existence? Or was it a more natural consequence? I mean, think about it. The Israelites had been deported, so the land had become kind of empty and desolate. It was going wild. And what happens in that kind of situation? Predators, like lions, move in. So the problem was a result of the situation, which of course, God is in control of.
So the people are, understandably terrified of being lion food. So they do what seems pretty logical, right? They send a message to the king of Assyria, and they're basically like, hey, we don't know the rules for the local god here. Can you please send us a priest to teach us the bare minimum so these lions will leave us alone?
And the king says, sure. He sends them back one of the old Israelite priests. But the kind of religion this priest ends up teaching them, well, it had nothing to do with a real relationship with God. It was a religion of pure appeasement. Dr. Oswalt nails it. He calls this human religion of the best sort. It's that classic human instinct, isn't it? Something bad is happening, so a god must be angry. What is the absolute least we can do to make him happy and just get him off our backs?
And the whole plan was kind of flawed from the get-go. The priest they got was from the northern kingdom, and he sets up his teaching in a town called Bethel, a place with a long, ugly history of idol worship. So he doesn't teach them the real deal. He teaches them this religious mishmash, a little bit of God mixed in with a whole lot of their old pagan stuff.
And this all leads to the central mind-bending paradox of the whole story, stated right there in the text. They feared the Lord, but they also served their own gods. Wait, what? How can you do both of those things at the same time? What does that even mean?
It means they were all about appeasement. They gave a little tip of the hat to the God of Israel. They did just enough to keep the lions away, to check the box. But their real loyalty, their true service, that was still with the gods they brought with them from their old homes. They were just covering all their bases.
And this is where this ancient story suddenly becomes a mirror. It's so easy for us to look back 2,000 years and judge these Samaritans. But that instinct to just appease God, that's a deeply human thing, isn't it?
So we have to stop and ask ourselves that tough question. The same one Dr. Oswalt asks himself. Does this describe me? Do I give God a little bit of my time on Sunday, just enough to feel okay, while my real energy and devotion the other 6 days of the week is actually spent serving something or someone else?
And what are these modern gods? I mean, they're the things we really build our lives on. The chase for power? The climb for success? Our relentless pursuit of comfort? Or that desperate need to feel totally and completely secure? We can end up serving these things with our whole hearts, all while telling ourselves we're serving God.
So if that's what the fear of the Lord isn't, if it's not appeasement, then what is it? Let's finally unpack the much healthier and way more powerful truth of what it really means to fear God.
Okay, so you've got two kinds of fear. First, there's the fear of judgment. This is sheer terror that God is out to get you. The New Testament says this is the kind of fear that God's perfect love completely casts out. But the fear of the Lord, that's something else entirely. It's reverent awe. It's the life-changing decision to build your entire existence on one foundational, undeniable reality. There is a God, and He is not you.
And the Bible makes this incredible promise. It says, stop being afraid of all the other powers and pressures in the world. Don't waste your life trying to appease them. Instead, it says, fear the Lord your God, because He is the only one who can actually deliver you from all your real enemies.
And that's the great, beautiful reversal here. That's the good news. When you truly fear the Lord, when you live in that place of reverent, life-ordering awe, you are finally and completely set free from having to fear anything or anyone else.
Which leaves us with just one last big question to think about. If the fear of the Lord means building your life on the reality of God, what then are you building your life on?